Welcome to Reading the Green, a golf and fantasy sports show. My name is Mike with Kyle on Tuesday, November 19th. This is episode 128, the RSM Classic preview. And that's kind of what we got. Kyle, we've been gone for so long, I don't even have a recap to go back to. We didn't do anything for the Worldwide. We didn't do anything for the Shriners. How you doing?
Yeah, the events got a little sideways there. It's fall. Life was a little busy, but we're here. We're here now, and that's what matters. RSM.
It is what matters. The RSM. I mean, this is the grand finale. It's in this spot on the PGA Tour calendar for years, and it's this sort of celebration of, how do I put this? Celebration of elitist southeastern Georgia boy golfers that live in this little bubble on St. Simon's Island and dominate attendance at this golf tournament. Is that a good way to put it? I don't want to project anything else on them.
Exactly. I think you hit it on the head. I mean, and not to bury the lead completely, but you do have some family in attendance this week as well, right?
Always do. I think we had some guest hosts over the years this week. But yeah, my sister-in-law supports the tournament, and I think my parents are down there this week, my brother, and they're gonna have a great time in St. Simon's Island. I've always wanted to go. You know, my wife and I have always thought like that might be a fun, not just the RSM, but like St. Simon's is this little golf mecca, seaside down there in the southern part of Georgia, and it seems like a cool spot to visit at some point.
You know, I've spent a little bit of time down that way, but I've never actually been on St. Simon's Island.
Sometimes I wonder if it's though one of those places that if you're not like from that part of the country or you're not familiar with it, that you might not get it. I don't know. I think about that with some of the smaller vacation destinations in the Midwest here. It's like if you're not really from the Midwest, like are you going to get the culture or the history or whatever? So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe someday.
Yeah, I just looked real quick. I've been like just crossing the Florida border on Amelia Island, and just north of there, I've been on Tybee Island, but not on St. Simon's.
I've been to Amelia Island too. Didn't know that. Fun connection. Well, here we go. We do have a preview for the RSM Classic to talk a little bit about that. I want to keep things topical. And in the spirit of that, we do have a rather large update that's got golf Twitter all sideways on the PGA Tour, especially one of the more prominent golf Twitter voices in Ryan French, aka Monday Q Info, who did change his handle for a hot minute to, I think it was No More Monday Q Info in protest, but he's back to Monday Q Info. And this guy, I mean, if you don't follow him, he is a great golf follow, and he literally has made his entire career as a part of the alternative media by following the deepest stories in golf. Basically, it was a guy that was showing up to Monday qualifiers and checking out and providing updates on guys that were the stories to tell on Monday, guys that are just trying to make it on the PGA Tour, that are sleeping on couches and in their cars and grinding their ways to their dream job. And he has, like I said, he's been elevated to one of the top voices in golf, also alternative media. And he got a little bit sideways on the changes that were approved by the PGA Tour policy board this week. And this was floated a couple of weeks ago, and it kind of got people talking, but today it was actually approved. So Kyle, sounds like you're not really in all the details, which is perfect. So I can throw a couple of big changes your way, and you can tell me what you think the residual impact is going to be.
Sounds great. Yeah, I haven't been involved as much in the social media space of the golf community the last couple of weeks, so I'm going to be reacting live here to a lot of it.
The conversation, obviously, over the last 2 years with the emergence of LIV and the obsession with guaranteeing tons of money for golfers because we should, and not because they necessarily earned it, but because it's what athletes get because they're professional athletes. this is the latest turn and probably the most dramatic of changes to support that narrative. And so the biggest one is the change of the top 125 players in the FedEx Cup list typically retained their tour card for the next year. That number will now be 100.
Okay.
20% reduction in the number of players that are guaranteed their card the next year.
So it further amplifies the haves stay the haves and the have-nots become the have-nots. But unless there's other wrinkles to this, I guess if I'm trying to find some silver lining, yes, it's going to be harder for the hanger-on types, especially with the small fields, to maybe get up there to qualify. But also maybe proactively, we're going to push some of those players that, we're good for a couple of years but have fallen off out quicker instead of seeing the same guys every week, perhaps.
Yeah, you're right. Like in a vacuum, this in theory would drive competition. It would say we're going to see more turnover, we're going to see more guys on the bubble busting their butt, and we're going to see more guys just saying you can't just hang on. And I'm looking at an article here, and Lucas Glover is very outspoken about this because Lucas Glover probably has floated around that number a whole lot the last 5, 6, 7 years after he won a major more than a decade ago. What comes to mind for me is Wyndham Clark being so outspoken about that. Like this, he was the guy that said fields should be 75 players, they should be 100 players, whatever. Of course, he was the guy that had gotten his card after finishing 110 in the FedEx Cup list a couple of years ago. So it's the case where the ladder was let down for these guys, pulled them up, and then they, pulled it up behind them. But that's not all the changes. Field sizes are going to shrink. So instead of a full field event being 156 players, it will now be 144 players, and then a number of the flagship events that had typically been 144 or 132 players will shrink to 120 players. So again, not huge shifts. 20 players here and there, but still 15% of fields, 20% of fields.
Yeah, not huge numbers in general. We've talked about it a lot in the spot. I don't like smaller fields, especially when playing the game of DFS. Like the bigger fields, just brings more chance, more players to play into it. One, again, looking for a silver lining, and I did see maybe a little bit on this one, is it's about the trying to get in the fringe seasons anyway, right? A whole round completed in a day. But are you hiding from the real problem there with making this change outside of looking at pace of play?
I will guarantee that not every event will finish with the reduced field sizes. You will still have the magic word slow play affect the ability to complete Thursday and Friday rounds, even with 120 or 144 players. Absolutely. It'll probably get worse, honestly.
They won't feel the need to pick it up. And did they add any language around pace of play? And you would think they'd couple that with, hey, we're doing it this, but we also would ask for this.
This wasn't in response to it, but there was a video of Charlie Hull floating around this past week saying that she believes 3 strikes and it's back to Q school. That's what she thinks should be the 3 slow play penalties, and you just lose your card.
Oh, who even gets penalties though, right? They get warnings, but put on the clock and nothing happens.
So again, okay, so we've shrunk the number of players retaining their card. We've shrunk the field sizes, and again, you put those two and two together. Okay, fine. We shrink the number of players retaining their card, so therefore we're going to increase competition. But then we reduce the number of opportunities for players to be competitive, and so they can't really make up that ground. And so then, finally, I'm going to layer one more on top of this. Korn Ferry sees its biggest change with the number of spots receiving their tour card from the Korn Ferry finals the previous year. It typically had been the top 30 players in the Korn Ferry points list would get their card for the next year. That number goes down to 20 from 30. So a 33% reduction in spots from Korn Ferry. And then the top 5 from Q School will also get their cards. It traditionally was top 5 and ties, so maybe that's another, I don't know, call it 4 to 5 cards there.
Did those numbers change last year at all? Right? Or was it just the PGA Tour University and the DP numbers?
Those were the ones that were updated last year. The Corn Ferry and Q School spots had not updated, so those were changes this year.
I mean, at the end of the day, someone's got to have less, right? So, by nature of it, I don't know how you work this in, but you almost need you need an inverse Q School where you have, and this is just being workshopped on the spot, so maybe there's some things that aren't completely thought through here, but what if you had like a veterans card or something of that nature once you're over a certain age, that if you fell out of the top 50, you're in that second wave, but this would be a way to kind of drive against it. Oh, well, if all those guys, once they get in, just going to be there, that there's some sort of competition for, the 10 people in that pocket, and there's only spots for 5.
To keep
that way
their card.
You're injecting new blood.
Make the bottom 10 guys actually retain their card by throwing the bottom 5, the 5 guys out. Players 95 to 96 to 100 might get thrown out. They got to fight for their spot. That's actually, I mean, we're introducing all levels of relegation. I don't want to sound live-ish here, but we might as well. I mean, this is effectively what we're trying to do, is squeeze this so much. I'm going to layer on another change for you. So we've reduced the cards, we've reduced the qualifiers of cards, reduced the field sizes, and now we're going to reduce the points distribution for FedEx Cup points for non-top finishers. So there's some nuance to the points, but just basically, like, if you finish outside of the top 10, and I believe in a couple of signature events it might be a little higher, you will receive fewer points. So so by playing well in the signature events and the majors, you will be now receiving even a more disproportionate number of points by finishing in the top 10. And so again, the haves makes it easier for the haves to have, makes it harder for the have-nots to catch up.
Play better scenario, right? But it's not necessarily, even if you play better, you get your card, you don't get enough starts, right? And that was a lot of the complaints guys had this year that were in that top 30 from Corn Ferry standpoint. You're reducing fields, you're going to have less starts for them. What is your path to move from those off-field events to a signature event?
So I think the big question is like, okay, the PGA Tour, which I think the general reaction from golf Twitter has just been like, goodbye PGA Tour. Like, this is it. We're going to just turn this into, I'm not going to call it exhibition. Like, you're still going to see most of the best golfers in the world competing for, legacy leaving stuff. But you're pushing out a lot of really good talent. And I have this question, like, where does that talent go? Like, does Corn Ferry get stronger because we've pushed so much talent out of the PGA Tour? Does PGA Tour Americas gets better because there's more trickle down? Does the Minnesota State Open get better because Tom Hoagie can't hang on to his PGA Tour card and he's got to play the Minnesota State Open? Like, what is the trickle down effect for professional golf? Or do fewer players just chase the dream because it's become so less attainable that what's the point? I'm just going to go to business school and get a job.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I feel like situations like this, everyone always, likes to spew their hot takes, especially in the snow globe that is the Twitter golf community that we tend to get a lot of our feedback from. At the same time, though, I wonder if there's an element of this that guys won't hang on as long either. Maybe Rory's not a good example, but the guys that, because you can earn more money if you break through and a higher value of money than maybe the Ricky Fowlers could have if he didn't have the marketing piece, just to throw a name out there. Maybe guys won't hang on as long either, though.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess we are trying to get rid of the Brendan Todds of the world, not to hate on Brendan, but like that seems like it's kind of the point. It's like if you didn't rise and win and compete regularly, making cuts just isn't going to cut it. And I suppose maybe I mean a lot of people are hating on the PGA Tour right now for approving these changes. It's what the players have advocated for, obviously because the haves have the largest voice here. But maybe at the end of the day, it is a better product. Like maybe at the end of the day, you're gonna see star power week in and week out, and it takes stepping up and winning to actually have a chance to have longevity, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what they're trying to incentivize and drive towards, right? To your point, like you're trying to have the events with, the Rorys of the world, and all those guys, on a Sunday, it being them and not Brendan Todd.
In what made Rory special? Like we're like not everybody can be Rory, but what made Rory special? He showed up from a very young age and he won.
Mm-hmm.
Scotty Scheffler did it. Xander's done it. Like the stars are not guys that showed up and hung around by making a bunch of cuts. They're guys that showed up and won from the get-go. And those are the guys that are going to be rewarded. And maybe I don't hate that so much. I get Brian French doesn't like that there's going to be fewer Monday Q spots. I forgot to mention that part. Fewer Monday Q spots available each week, and that kind of hurts his brand, of course. But common golf viewer, I think, is probably going to be okay.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, they had to do something. PGA Tour, I mean, all these changes were set in motion by the live process, right? And they couldn't just stand pat, had to find a way to get the hiring more money. And at the end of, like you said, they voted on it. So at the end of the day, that's who's driving this.
Yeah. Well, I guess I look forward. I'm going to watch the same amount of golf I watch in 2025. I'm going to bet on the same amount of golf I watch in 25, which is a lot more than the golf that I watch, but it's not going to change. I'm not less interested in the big events. That's all I watch. I'm a huge golf fan, and all I really watch is the big events, and that's what's going to happen the next year. Those aren't going away. So I guess the impact of this is going to be on the players on themselves that are on the fringe. That's the impact.
Because I get my Thursday morning spring tee times at 6:30 while getting on the East Coast starts, while getting the kids ready for the day. I'm good. Tune in there Friday morning, then a little bit Saturday, Sunday afternoon. Let's go.
Smaller fields, later tee time starts might be easier to take advantage of some underfilled DraftKings contests. Usually that's what you can do when you're not starting at 5 a.m.
2 years ago, it was a lot easier than it's been lately.
Yeah.
Maybe this will get some of the people back, some of the sharps back off the DFS streets.
Well, let's close things out. We're going to talk about the RSM Classic, the final event of the PGA Tour season. Kyle, I brought out a top two beer for me as we send off the PGA Tour season, King Su. If somebody asks me what's your favorite beer, this is usually what I say. I mean, it's hard to have favorites, but this is usually what I say. All Citra, double IPA. This can was really good. I opened it. It was really good.
Hey, I wish you would have taken your first sip on the pod. You had a reaction.
I had a reaction. I was like, that one was good. Wow.
I'm jealous. Slim pickings over here. I have the go-to lighter beer in our household, the Fair State Pilsner, but I don't even think there's an IPA in the fridge right now. So,
did we drink all of them on Saturday night?
Somebody may have. I try to stay away from the IPAs at that point. We might have had a little Bourbon County barrel night over here to start with, and it divulged into lots of other beers. Yeah, there's not an IPA to be found. So I'll leave those people unnamed, but a couple of people did some numbers.
Long-term RTG listeners know that we have we have tried to do a cellar night, and cellar night has kind of merged with weird beer night lately, where we bring out some of these bottles we've had for years. And Kyle, you just had a cellar night for some friends, and that inspired me to have, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, have a cellar night for a school fundraiser. And I had some learnings from your cellar night, which is don't have 4 people attempt to drink 8 bottles of Bourbon County brand stout.
We had 5.
I was going to ask what the final count was. It felt like 8, but 5 is still
We had 5. We had 5 people. First off, you forgot to count yourself. And then I think what we did 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and then we did one variant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was
that was plenty. Right.
There was a Japanese whiskey that was passed around in between. You had one buddy just slamming Surly Furious in between servings of BCBS. It was a lot. I had a tummy ache. I'll say that.
Same. Yeah.
All right. Well, the PGA Tour heads down to the RSM Classic at Sea Island in St. Simons Island, Georgia. Like I said in the opening, this is a classic stop. This is Davis Love's. This is his home. This is his complex that burned down a handful of years ago. But this is where he recruits all of his Southern Georgia boys, guys that are former Bulldogs, guys that grew up in the southeast part of Georgia, to come down and play. A lot of the PGA Tour's players make their homes here. And had I done enough prep, I could have told you all the guys in the field that are Sea Island guys, but usually you can guess by their names. It's something like Davis Thompson or Grayson Sigg or William Gordon III. Those guys are all Sea Island guys, and that's what you get this week. You get a bunch of players that, and I appreciate these spots that are really good for families, a nice time of year right before the Thanksgiving holiday, and you just get a lot of players that seem like they enjoy coming down here. I don't know that that's come through on course history. There's a couple of guys, obviously, that are going to have really strong course history there, but we got all kinds of different winners over this at this event over the last handful of years. So, Kyle, what do you got for me on the 2 courses at Sea Island?
We have the Seaside course and the Plantation course. Traditionally, the Seaside course plays a touch harder, but that did flip 2 of the rounds last year. One note, if you are looking at stats, we only have shot tracker history from 1 course in the past, but they each measure out around 7,000 yards. It is kind of a ryegrass that we don't see it in a lot of different places. The Plantation course has water in 10 holes. Seaside course has water on 13 holes. Overall, off the tee, we're looking at probably good drive percentage or club down percentage more than anything. You don't need to be long, and it helps to be accurate, but you don't have to be overly accurate. You just can't get completely wayside, get in a bunch of trouble. These are very easy to hit greens, 78%, much higher than tour average because they are very large greens. So from an approach standpoint, we are going to always have some approach in there. From proximity bucket, kind of looking more at that short course, 125 to 175, probably those 2 buckets. I'm not really concerned about around the green this week. Pretty easy there. Then once we get to the greens, just like always, that 5 to 10 foot, 10 to 15 foot area. And we do have Bermuda on the greens for as far as putting. I do like to sprinkle in some comp course history here outside of Sea Island. The other places I would look at is Pebble and Port Royal as well.
Port Royal's a good comp, and you know why? Weather chaser like you is going to know that wind can play a huge factor at Sea Island, in part because you have the 2 course split on Thursday and Friday. The Plantation course a little more protected from the wind, and the Seaside course very much exposed to the wind. And so if you can get savvy enough with your player pool and your weather forecasts, again, you want to look these things up right on Wednesday evening. you want to get the less windy of the 2 days. You want to get your players out on Seaside if it's possible. Now, the early forecasts here are looking like there's not really going to be much weather, precipitation, wind, regardless. And so we just might see an absolute birdie fest across the board. But if it is possible to get an edge, you want the less windy of the day, load up on players on Seaside because they're going to have an easier time on Plantation if the wind does pick up on the other day.
It's a little bit of a nod to what we see early in the season and traditionally as well. Places like Torrey Pines, for example, where you have the 2-course split and one plays very different than the other. So that's a great little tidbit, Mike.
Yeah, Ludwig last year, and I don't have the. I got to imagine last year must have been prime scoring conditions. Ludwig -29, 4-shot win over Mackenzie Hughes -25, but the previous year was Svensson at -19, and typically we see that high teens, low 20s, but last year was just prime scoring conditions. So with that, Kyle, do we get a rundown of the model so far this week? This is probably not getting very many more picks. People have kind of checked out for Thanksgiving already.
Yeah. We'll give you what we have and then just highlight some shout outs, I guess, to some of our favorite contributors over the year. It's always a good time to try to highlight some of those. So far, leading the way, we have Grayson Sig, 7,300. Almost 50% of the mention share, a little soft on the MPI. Just looking at who's highlighting him so far, Landon Slinsky over DK Network, Andy Lack, Golf Digest, and Alex Hunter at the Fantasy Labs Cash Plays. Next, we have a quadruplet of.
What word is that? Tell me what you think that word means.
No, it was not meant to come out like that. It just did, so I just went with it. We have a 4-pack. It has a 38% mention share. Quadruplet. All right. So we have Adam Svensson, 7,800 salary this week. Ben Griffin, 9,300. JJ Spawn, 8,400. And our defending champion, Ludwig, at 11,200. So far of those gentlemen, the highest on MPI is Ludwig. And he's perfect at this point in time.
All right, yeah, let's dig in. Let's dig in on the top of the RTG model. I like this because you just get a smattering of 7K plays, 9K plays, and then Ludwig, obviously most expensive guy in the field at 11.2. I'll just start there. You know, if I look back, obviously he is the defending champ, and you gotta like a guy that got his first win on this course. And you often look back at some of these guys when they have their first win somewhere, and that just leads to like a decade of strong course history somewhere. It just suits their eye. And Ludwig typically is a guy that feels a bit course fit proof. His game is so well rounded, kind of like Xander, that you sense he's going to show up everywhere. He did miss the cut here in 2022, but finished with the win. Actually seemed like played all right in 2022, and he missed that cut. But Ludwig has not played competitive golf since the end of August, early September, Tour Championship. Do we think that's required for Ludwig to be in tournament form, or do we trust he's been working some money games on the side to stay in competitive shape?
He's a young guy. I'm not as worried about that with someone like him. I am curious, though. I mean, he played quite a bit last fall, right?
That's a good question.
Maybe not on tour.
He played the WWT, he played the RSM, he played the Shriners, he played the Sanderson Farms. So he had 4 events in the US after the Tour Championship.
It's at 11.2, that's a lot of money to spend up. But I think from a cash perspective, he's a guy that I feel comfortable trying to jam in. Because I think the miscut chance is probably pretty low. But probably from a GPP perspective, I would go elsewhere. Is what my current thought is, Mike.
Which maybe takes us over to the guy that's sitting at the top of the model, which we are projecting, or I should say, we used Rick Rungood ownership data is projecting fairly low owned, but a Grayson Stig Grayson Sigg, I believe he's a Sea Island guy. I believe he went to the University of Georgia. Um, Grayson has been playing some good golf this fall. Finished T11 in Utah at the Black Desert, T23 at the Shriners, T9 at the Buddy B. And if he's coming in that low owned, and we're getting him at 7,300 in a familiar location, that I'm not saying that he's my horse here, but I'm just gonna grab his course history here really quick. Um, I don't mind Grayson having finishing T8 and T15 his last two times out the RSM Classic. I can't believe he's gonna go under 5% owned.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a popular play as we get closer and the week goes on. At this point in time, this football season, maybe guys haven't dug in quite as much as normal outside the betting community. So I think that's going to catch some steam. Another guy that might, if you go down from the top salaries a little bit, is Ben Griffin. He's 9,300. We highlighted him there. Good on the MPI. He's been playing some pretty good golf. He missed because of Shriners. But outside of that, he was 11th at the Black Desert, T22 at Zozo, T24 at the WWT, and 8th. What'd you say there? The Buddy. What was that? I liked it.
The Buddy B.
The Buddy B. I like it.
I heard that
Buddy
somewhere.
B.
I can't claim it, but I need to propagate it.
And then you look again. He's a Sea Isle guy. And you go back to his course history here, last two times out, T29, T8, and last year was just money on the greens with a putter, gaining 6.8 strokes. So I like Ben Griffin, but also think he's going to catch some steam, and is probably as the second guy in as the week goes on.
So speaking of steam, I mean, so we've gone through a couple of guys here that, even Ben Griffin projecting at 15%. A couple of guys that really seem to be good fits. Grayson Sigg, Ben Griffin, get some salary relief. So where is all the ownership going? Is it going to Denny McCarthy, Davis Thompson, obviously Ludwig, but Davis and Denny haven't really been playing a whole lot. Davis a little bit more. Also being a Georgia guy. I mean, I could see Davis here, but I just feel like there's a couple of other guys to take some relief that we just mentioned over a Davis Thompson, even though I think Davis Thompson's going to be a winner again in 2025. Could even be a two-time winner in 2024.
You know whose
what
name?
Do you think?
You sold me, Mike. I'm intrigued.
You just skip the. I mean, you could take Ludwig and skip the rest of the 10K plays and just jump right down to nines, or even, I mean, you can just like skip Ludwig too if you really want and just go play a whole bunch of 9K players. Like I don't think that's out of the question. I don't think you need to jump on Davis, Denny. Where else is it going? Eric Cole.
Yeah, I think you're going to be different with that approach. People a week like this, people don't put as much time into it to really try to think through some of those game theory pieces. So
yeah, I mean, but look at our winners. Robert Streb, a two-time winner here. Taylor Gooch, Adam Svensson. I think Ludwig is the outlier as being the star power that shows up on Sea Island and win, and he's not a Sea Island guy. So I almost want to just sleep on any star player that's got the Southeast Georgia connection.
So you think, all right, well, we haven't talked about Killer Keith.
We haven't.
I don't have anything queued up for him. I'm just assuming you said that, and I thought that would be perfect. So while you're getting ready for Killer Keith, a guy that hasn't gotten any shout outs in our model yet that kind of surprised me is Austin Eckroat, who won the last time we saw him at the WWT, and that was coming off T46, back-to-back T46 at Shriners BMW. And then you go back to Southwind, he was T18 and 6. He's 8,500 this week. That seems like a very good price for Austin. And granted, yes, people don't like to go there when he has just won. But shout out to our Andy Lack on this one. He highlighted what he called his nerd stat of the week. So I would encourage you to go out there. There's free content from Andy. Go try to track it down. He has a Discord out there these days. He can get you signed up for. But he was just talking about the generous fairways and wide greens, and based on a model he put together around that with driving accuracy percentage, greens and regulation percentage. Austin Incro kicked out his number one for him. So I would dig in there. Shout out again, Andy Lack, for that one, but it caught my attention.
I want to go back to Keith Mitchell. Keith Mitchell is a Sea Island guy, went to the University of Georgia. Keith Mitchell, we love Keith. We loved Keith all year. We were there for Keith at the Valspar when he choked away a huge payday for us in the Calcutta, and we were rooting for him the rest of the year. Keith has missed the cut at the WWT. He missed the cut at the Shriners. He missed the cut at the Black Desert Championship, his last 3 events. He is now showing up to a very familiar place with really no incentive to play well. When is the last time a Sea Island guy has won the RSM Classic?
You tell me, Mike.
I don't know that it ever has. I mean, Chris Kirk is a University of Georgia guy, I think, or a Sea Island guy. He's an RSM guy. He's one of the 3. He won in 2012. The list of winners here is so incredibly random that I do not think that we should have this recency bias on Ludwig. I really think you skip right down to the low 9s and you just start with some of the names that we threw out there, Ben Griffin being a really good one.
This guys didn't win, but Ryan Harmon was T2. Chiz was T2. Webb Simpson, no, he's generally in the area. He lost in a playoff. So they just can't get it done.
Those are good DFS plays. Those are fair. Yeah. Those are fair. Good DFS. Brian Harmon is in the field this week.
Yeah, just couldn't get it done. But you know who else has 2 runners up here, Mike? Mackenzie Hughes. He's only getting 1 mentions so far this week. And he's $8,800, and maybe that price point's driving it a little bit, but I will give the shout out to Lynn Hochberg over at RotoWire, who is highlighting Hughes. Yes, he has the course history here, but he's also been playing some decent golf. I mean, at the Buddy B, he was T67. Don't have much strokes gained there, so can't look to see what got sideways. But Sanderson Farms, a little bit more of a comp course, I would argue T8. You go back to the Pro Core, he was T4. So Mackenzie Hughes, I'm intrigued if people would go away at that $8,800 price point.
So let's do this. Let's start building the lineup because I think we've thrown out a bunch of names, and I'm really curious what this looks like. I mean, I don't really want to skip Ludwig, but I'm really curious what this looks like if we just go no Ludwig, no Davis Thompson, no Denny. I could be convinced on Brian Harmon, but I want to start with Ben Griffin.
Let's do it.
I'm going to also just pop in Grayson Sigg as well because I think model favorite right now. I think he does pick up a little bit of steam, but like you said, the casual players, the football DFS guys this time of year, they're not playing Grayson Sigg this week.
Yeah, we didn't talk about him yet, but I think someone else that needs to be on the radar is my boy JTP. He is a local guy. Again, won the last time out at the Shriners. But that case, Andy Lack made for Ecro, that did intrigue me. But the other guy at the top of the model we haven't talked about yet that I think can be a great course fit, so let's put him in next, is JJ Spawn at 8,400.
JJ Spawn just killing me this year every time I play him. This is going to be the week. Last week of the year, he's got to come through.
I need to catch up to you on who we have in so far, so give me one hot second.
I mean, I like JJ Spawn, again, it kind of comes down to what is it going to look like from an ownership perspective? If we're going to get him in the low teens, 8,400, maybe a little little more expensive, but I think if we're going with a pure balanced build and we're taking basically a bunch of guys in the 8-9K range, we can play Spawn and have a decent chance at a top 5 finish. T13, T15, T16, his last 3 times out at the RSM Classic. Do we just plug him in for a top 15 this week? He did finish T30, T6 at the Zozo, 30th at the WWT, 34 at the Shriners. He's had a nice, other than his WD at the Sanderson, he's had a nice fall. No reason JJ doesn't have a good week this week.
All right, who do you got next, Mike?
Well, I like the Mackenzie Hughes play. I think that's a sneaky take that he's got these 2 runners up and just not getting a lot of attention. I mean, unfortunately, I'd love to see this 12% number flip to something like 7 or 8 and just find some folks sleeping on an $8,800 Mackenzie Hughes. But I think if we're going this route, like I think we'll have no problem getting him in if we're here. So let's take Mackenzie Hughes. 2 players left, $8,100. Stay the course. I don't think there's a reason to spend up in the 10Ks at this point.
No, let's see what this does to us because I got to take. If we go, I don't love how much this leaves us, but I was looking at Seamus Power. He's 9,200, so touch more than I would like. But again, just a guy that's been playing, quite frankly, great golf since middle of June. T20, 17, T65, 37, T28, T10, T26, T11, T11. Did have the cut at the Shriners, but then T13, T23, 3 has the rebound after that. But I probably don't like leaving us with that with down to 7. What do you think? Should we try to go?
I think it's okay. I think we can afford to get a really funky pick in here. Plus, I mean, how do you turn down a guy that's finished in the top 5 his last 2 times out here?
All right. Let's do it then.
Okay. Plugging in Seamus Power, you got $7,000 left. You need to get crazy. You need to get crazy. You got to give me a Hail Mary. Robert Streb won this tournament twice. And I saw a take for a guy here that I'm curious where he's going to come in from an ownership perspective. But your guy, Andy Lack, you're just talking. I'm curious how this comes through. This is part of his Golf Digest article. He tells me that it is time to play Joel Damon. 5th last year. One of the best iron players in the field. Does particularly well on short golf courses, which both of these are. This is the time to get Joel Damon on a last hurrah top 10. 6,600, you win? 6,800, excuse me.
All right, yeah, I'm always down to play Joel. I don't think I ever get it right. The other name I was looking at kind of in that range, but it's wild. He's actually a little bit more expensive than Joel. Is Zach Johnson, 6,900. He currently resides in the area, originally from Iowa, of course, or went to college in Iowa anyway. He's missed the cut last 2 times out here after his T16 and T6. So yeah, I not recommending that route. I'm clicking submit, Mike. I'm putting this entry in somewhere.
I never get Zach Johnson right. I fade him every time. In the John Deere Classic is another good example. It's like, oh, of course, the Iowa golf tournament. Well, technically Illinois golf tournament. Got to fade Zach Johnson. That ain't gonna work. He finishes top 10 in that tournament every year. Hasn't missed a cut in like 20 years. Joel Damon, it is. It's in. Grayson Sigg, Ben Griffin, JJ Spawn, Mackenzie Hughes, Seamus Power, Joel Damon. The leverage is going to come from Damon, and we're hopeful, and Sigg hopefully is a little more leverage on Mackenzie Hughes, Spawn, Power, Griffin. going to pick up a little bit of steam.
Just also, I think we'll get leverage just by nature of the build, right? How many people are going to go that approach and miss the bottom of the board? So that's where it's completely okay if if you have everyone that's over 10% and you're still at 70, 80%. If people aren't going in that same approach, you still have a path.
All right, Kyle. Well, I can guarantee that I maybe will watch some of the RSM Classic this week, maybe Sunday afternoon. I'm sweating out a solid single entry play here. Other than that, this is it. We got weird beer on the calendar. Not yet. We're going to try to squeeze it in December. And RTG has been mostly quiet this fall. It's going to be extra quiet this winter until we get to January.
Yeah, I'll sneak in a little bit. Looking forward to the next one, and we'll be back soon.
The last thing I'll leave you with is I played golf this past weekend. It was November 17th, November 16th. That's a nice golf season for Minnesota. I'm not going to lie. 9 holes on November 16th with, just a long sleeve on. Can't complain.
Yeah. How was the turf?
Course is in great shape. Great shape, honestly. Like, I'm kind of bummed that it was closed because a couple of 40-degree days here coming up. And I mean, I know the staff needs to do their thing for the winter, but it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Well, the last couple days probably were a little hard. It's been a little wet up here, but I'm glad you snuck out when you could. After the Bro Cup back in early October, I put the sticks away for the year. I've had a couple opportunities pass up, but I'm working on that winter swing change.
I'm so excited for it. I'm so excited for it. All right. Well, you can find RTG content on our Twitter feed at RTG Podcast, our YouTube channel, Reading the Green, and any major podcast platform. We'll be back at some point in December. Keep a watch out for our Weird Beer episode. It's always super fun, a fan favorite. We'll talk to you then. See you.